Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for joining this 8th edition of our peers webinars. We are really excited for this topic today on measuring readiness impacts, enabling AM&E of U.S. Southcom missions. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Jessica Jackson, who is our Senior Specialist for Assessment Monitoring and Evaluation here at CJHE. She is our CJHE stakeholder for this activity that you're going to learn, and she has also worked really closely with Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Pass, who is our featured speaker for today. So with that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Jackson.
So for today's topic, ensuring medical readiness amongst our forces is imperative to enabling them to provide care in any situation, in any scenario. Now, one way that we do this is by using embedded health engagement teams as a model where we work side by side with a partner nation to provide acute care in resource-limited settings. However, historically, measuring these engagements has been challenging. And so today, with our speaker, he is going to talk to us about a pilot program that he developed in collaboration with Air Force Southern with the aim of ensuring readiness, with the aim of measuring readiness gains on EHET missions and creating sustainable AM&E practices. Now, we are very pleased to have him here. Lt Col Pass is an international health specialist. Right now, he's at Air Combat Command, Office of the Command Surgeon, and he's also a dentist by trade. In addition to the work that he's done with AFSOUTH, he's also offered guidance to Air Force's Central Command, Office of the Surgeon in regard to assessment, monitoring, and evaluation of medical partner capability, medical partner capacity building initiatives. And so with all of that work, he has cemented his legacy as an AM&E advocate and champion, and we are very pleased to have him with us here today. And so without further ado, I will turn it over to you, Colonel Pass.
Okay, perfect. So good morning, I'm Lt Col Pass, and I'm excited to share with you a story in medical readiness data collection. Please excuse that technical delay there. So AM&E, as we mentioned, which means assessment, monitoring, and evaluation, gets at measuring program effectiveness. In short, what are we trying to achieve, and are we achieving that intent? So our work, as you can see here, is a huge collaboration of many organizations. We believe we set the necessary conditions in which AM&E can absolutely thrive. So I'm proud to share with you this collective story. I hope you take away some interorganizational partnerships as themes, again, that enable the conditions for consistent readiness data collection. And indeed, we wanted to promote a cultural shift in the Southcom AOR. And again, this was all operationalized by Team AFSOUTH HG, in which we were proud to support. This is the disclaimer here. And I have nothing really, the opinions here, just said that over my own. And this is exactly what we're going to discuss today. So first, want to get into a little bit of background here as you see that paper there. And please, I encourage you to scan that at your leisurely after our event today. I'm going to provide you with a bit of background. Again, I love Team AFSOUTH because they are very innovative. And as Dr. Jackson mentioned, they fielded the concept of embedded health engagement teams to address the concerns against what traditionally are large-scale medical fair style delivery models. And so in opposition to that, this is a great idea to sort of for these small teams that go in and embed alongside our partners in their own healthcare infrastructure, and they meet the demand signals for the actual medical specialties that they collaborate on and see patients. So the advantages here are plentiful, but I want to hone in on that bolded quote there, because this presents, as we're looking at the team composition of these small EHETs, there's an opportunity here for really achieving effective monitoring and evaluation. And so that's sort of just the background of what the goal here is. And so we piloted this dedicated readiness data collector, right? Medical currency readiness data collector to modernize what that EHET team looks like, and to also modernize the type of data that we collect beyond patient numbers, right? Beyond the number of teeth extracted. How can we actually measure and prove readiness is being accomplished, and then validate and credit that readiness to our medics when they return back to their MTFs or their military treatment facilities? That is the purpose here. And so how this all really started is working with Team AFSOUTH. I was a part of an assessment team that really looked at what we did the year prior. We called it a post-mission assessment. And looking at the reporting requirements, there's a specific Department of Defense instruction. It's 5502-25, but that's the one that's going to detail humanitarian and civic assistance. And what that says is that she needs to measure the long and short-term impact for the partner nation for that EHET, or whatever your activity is with our partners. And then you also need to show the readiness value. And so looking at the previous year, I saw that, wow, we did patient care, and some of these things you can indirectly tie to readiness, but we did not measure readiness directly. And so that brought up the idea, well, let's create the space, let's create a position, a pilot position that actually goes down, and that's their dedicated role to basically be a center out there and measure readiness in addition to clinical productivity or currency. So that was the engagement in St. Lucia, and you can see myself there in the top right corner. Okay. The problem here, though, it was just me. It was just one person without reach back for technical support. We initially planned for MCART. It's a medical currency and readiness training application. It's a mobile application. All right. And we ran into problems. There were some technical difficulties that I myself did not know how to resolve. And so we then began to think about inter-organizational collaborations, right? I'm no technical expert when it comes to issues in MCART. I simply assumed, hey, if our training audience out there can, they can connect to all kinds of social media apps, and they can connect to this readiness data tracking app. But that wasn't the case. So we shifted, we flexed, and we switched to pen and paper. So it was essentially me tapping into the training audience, the medical teams doing the actual work, collecting data by hand. And this is the best that I could do by myself. What you can see here is that, yes, it's data, it's an extension of what we typically measure when we're out in these direct patient care missions. However, there's no strategic messaging attached to it. It's unrefined raw data. We could absolutely, there's an opportunity to do more and expand upon this position. You'll see an acronym there, Comprehensive Medical Readiness Program. That's the Air Force's way of how we stay ready. You'll hear that term a lot, readiness, 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 a different spectrum range of military activities. For medical, it's basically how do we keep current with our skills to see patients? And other services have a different format. The Army calls it, I believe, ICTLs, and the Navy has their own. And so that's what you see there for the Air Force. It was an Air Force specific mission, but again, much room for improvement. I only have my one, experiences, skill sets, ideas. We needed room for collaboration, especially because that mission was it was pretty minimal scale, right? It was one country, St. Lucia, and it was one medical activity, which was vascular surgery. And so what about now here in Paraguay for Amistad, which is another AFSOUTH implemented mission? Now we're talking about a 1 month long, again, embedded health engagement team going downrange. I have a family, right? So I'm only really able to contribute 2 weeks of this. And then we tasked another person to pilot this position. And so we synced, and I thought we had a great sync on what the actual outcomes and behaviors, products for this position should be. But when we compared notes in the end and products, it was wholly different. And so that began to make me think, wow, we really need to focus on implementation before scaling up this effort, because by this time there was some demand signal, right? Yes, there could be improvements on sort of how we presented those numbers before, but how do we actually scale up an effort to then create more and more of these dedicated data collector positions? And so that really brought us back to the drawing board. because we had something right on the deck, which was the Lesser Antilles Medical Assistance Team, which is a higher order step in complexity here. We're talking multiple countries throughout the Caribbean region. We're talking multiple treatment facilities that we would embed in. And so now we're talking about, instead of one person being able to have the bandwidth to collect this data, that's just impossible. We needed to be able to decentralize that role of collecting data to the actual clinical members, right? And so instead of, again, we've had some issues in the past with phone application access. We needed to onboard more stakeholders who had and could provide that expertise as we developed a full out implementation plan. And so that's what this slide gets into. You'll see the different organizations here. Myself, as a part of ACC, I was there in support as an IHS, thinking of the piloted position and the opportunities that we could, assign roles for that. That was sort of my, drawing on my experiences in advisory in this implementation role, right? Expanding on that pilot position. And then you have the actual supported unit, which is your AFSOUTH, command surgeon's office. And they're the ones who are at the operational level. They're recruiting those technical implementers of the actual medical activities, helping guide all of the requirements and operations and plannings to actually execute the mission. Obviously a huge stakeholder here. And then we have CGHE, which is the Center for Global Health Engagement, embedded at Uniformed Services University, and they're a huge stakeholder, right? There's stakeholders. There's only so much that I could do, again, with that little spreadsheet there with very rudimentary data collected. And then they have the actual expertise, right, for graphic data presentations, for assessment, monitoring, evaluation experts. And then you also have some dashboard capability. We have a developer of a dashboard that's able to project very meaningful real-time data to invested stakeholders that is also in collaboration with USU. And then you have the actual owners of the MCART application, and that is housed with AbMedCom. And so that's another collaboration that we brought in to really handle those technical aspects when you have, say, a clinical member downrange and says, hey, I'm having trouble accessing this app, right? We have all the answers and reach back to get you help. The actual implementing teams are right here with this organization. That's the Reserve Command. And so they are the ones with the funding and the invested training dollars to go out annually to execute the missions. And then this is all occurring under the Southcom umbrella. This is their geographic command. And then HCA, they actually have a program manager. Back then it was Mr. Figueroa to then get in and make sure that we are hitting those actual reporting requirements. Again, partner nation, short, long-term impact, and then also readiness. How are we proving that downrange? So these are the inner workings when we talk about an implementation program. What we decided to do was, well, before people are actually going downrange and participating in the EHADs, we want to familiarize them with the actual technology that they've used. So we created educational training products that are a part of like a 5-series or 5-course curriculum, about 5 hours. So we'll go over M-cards, how it operates, how to get access. There are scenarios where they can enter scenario data. So they, again, familiarizing, shaping the expectations for the actual engagement and the reporting requirements for all the members. We have a playbook that sort of then ties in the whole vision of what an implementation strategy or plan looks like. It defines everyone's roles. It defines how information flows throughout the process that is then aggregated through the app and the dashboard. And then we also have, again, the dashboard integration. It's something very specific where we're training our AM&E champions. Those are the ones that are basically playing the role that I used to when I piloted it. They're part of that Air Force Reserves team. They're the primary recipients of this training because they're going to be the sole point of contact for all of their teams when they go out in each country and they're doing that decentralized, data gathering. They're that first person that they contact for help. And so that's that person who is the target of our training in this pre-deployment run-up phase. This slide here addresses the technology that's incorporated here with this implementation plan. We have QR codes that gives them access to the actual app. And then this basically drills it down to the elements. After every day, there are certain expectations, certain types of data that will be inputted here. And it's reflected on the dashboard. And then there's also, let's say what I just described there was the individual level that we're collecting data. Now there's the actual mission health. How is the mission doing for the day? And that is actually collected through an admin app sheet. So this sort of tracks, okay, how many patients were seen that day, what types of patients, okay, how many prescriptions of glasses were delivered. That's the type of data. It then goes to the AM&E champions. It's all aggregated there and entered into a form. So this is also appears on the dashboard. Running everything together and how everything flows, I alluded to it before, but let's walk it through. You have the pre-deployment phase where myself and some elements of CGHE and USU, we are there in that training sort of platform. Again, we get the AM&E champion familiar and comfortable with their role through 5 sessions of either synchronous, and we also have added asynchronous content. And those are the topics there. MCART mobile app use, the admin data form that I talked about, the playbook, dashboard use, and then the teams actually deploy, they execute for their EHET mission. And then again, what I sort of alluded to before, every day, the medics who are doing the actual clinical work are going to submit their readiness and productivity every single day using MCART. You have these surrogate data collectors that are going to be in each site. So for this example, we have 4 treatment facilities that our team embedded in. And so each one of those is going to fill out a form and then submit it to the AM&E champion. AM&E champion then aggregates that data and then submits it, and it's all going to be viewable in the dashboard. What you see down here is that ideally, and how we've been practicing it, is the same training team, which already has some rapport with the AM&E champion. We're going to be there in the background throughout the mission for any type of reach back support, for technical issues, for maintaining that dashboard if anything pops up, for cleaning up the roster list, right, if people didn't make it in country, and etc. Here is a preview of what that dashboard entails. I will say here, it's a very iterative feedback process that we make sure that each round of AM&E champions that have experienced this pilot position, they give us feedback. One feedback and example was, hey, it's hard to tell what's what on the dashboard. Well, one thing here is that if it's a white tile block, then we know that that data came from that admin tool, right? And if we know that it is a green background, then we know that it's from the actual MCART data. So that just helps with ergonomics, reading the actual dashboard. So we did a quick turnaround with the technical experts, the app developers, and the dashboard developers to make sure that we responded in a timely manner with those changes. And then you'll see here other features of this dashboard. You can have internal communications that are archived in here. Maybe you want to tap into that later, where you can see certain frustrations that may have been lost in other desktops or platforms, but no, it's actually recorded here and archived within this platform. And then you also have a naughty list, and later we can talk about certain compliance that's actually necessary, accountability systems. It's built into the application as well. So what we talked about so far talked mainly about the training and the actual sort of pre-deployment and the actual execution phases. In the future, where we see this is going is, again, I've sort of played this role before, but it hasn't really been built out yet, where we're actually incorporating assessment pieces into sort of the cyclic program that, again, the intention is to meet all the requirements for HCA. So if we're going to try to reproduce that in a standardized way, we would have to sort of add a playbook to that as well and incorporate that into the implementation plan. These are the products that, again, because of this implementation and technology merge, AFSOUTH, Command Surgeon's Office was able to create a great product here that sort of summarizes qualitatively what component level, operational level, the lines of effort were actually achieved, and then coupling that with quantitative data for, hey, how many sites were we in, what capabilities were generated, what types of procedures were done, the return on investment value, everything is that in here and recorded on a one slider, and they were able to develop that with absolute speed, which we'll get into soon. So if you're considering standing up such a similar effort, I would say these are some of the lessons learned that we took away. You've already heard these themes so far. Just consider tactical AM&E a core planning function. As we developed the role, it was essential to just be present everywhere along the planning process, operationally, to see what's going on and how we could intertwine. Also, make sure you assign clear roles and responsibilities. Once you can sort of assess interorganizationally who brings what capabilities, make sure you define the clear roles, who does what, and so there's no confusion on how you're collecting and pulling those resources and testing them out. Know your reporting requirements. So again, ours were easily laid out in the DoD for the DoD instruction, laid out for humanitarian and civic assistance. That's an easy goal to hit, and then build everything around that. Determine appropriate process and technology. If it's just one site, then maybe you can do things very simply. If the complexity of the operation is just pretty high, right? Multiple sites, multiple countries, maybe you need more resources pulled in. Maybe you need decentralized execution. This here, I hopefully, we're running out a little bit of time, but I think these are great topics to really hit in the discussion afterwards. What I will say, the strengths of this implementation plan and merging it with the technology is we developed a tactical framework for GHG data collection. And again, we bridged it with the technology that's out there and available. Okay. The opportunities that I would say are the conditions that aren't quite there yet, or maybe some low-hanging fruit that we can tackle that helps us get to the ideal end state would be, hey, let's think about how we can integrate our service partners in this, and that effort it's already ongoing. How can we include our partners, right? Or there's some opportunities where we can see how they prepare themselves to be ready and what that data sharing looks like, because maybe that is the next step, an interim step towards measuring interoperability, right? How do we see the differences and the similarities in how we get ready medically? Institutional support, that's something that we're not quite yet. Again, it's a very ad hoc pickup game, but we're able to flex and receive and respond to sort of the feedback that we receive as we're sort of figuring out where this program will actually land in the future. The aspirations sort of reflect some of the end states. This would be great if someday we can have digital cybersecurity attached to this, enabling us to collect more higher order data, things that would touch on interoperability. We want to make this more accessible. So hopefully this is an example to show, hey, we've got this sexy technology and product. Let this be the impetus for units to really go out there and advocate for data collection on every type of medical engagement, because that then informs medical decisions. That's just the world we live in. It's a data-driven world. And the results here, real-time value-added AM&E that came at the speed of relevancy that was actually able to flow up to the highest levels to include the Secretary of Defense, right? We were not able to do this before because there was such a delay and gap because of the old spreadsheet formula, not so great at transmitting and analyzing data near real time, but we're there now. And so also what comes with that is to validate the actual readiness and credit it. We're able to process that data a lot faster. From before last year, it took, let's say 5-6 months, to now it can take honestly like a week or two or less, maybe even within a matter of days. So that's what we discussed today. We talked about this pilot project. I'm really happy to get into the discussions, questions there might be out there. If you're considering, scaling up your own or standing up your own effort, because I believe we can expand this out to an array of different types of engagement opportunities to include multilateral exercises and how we measure, patient movement, things like that between World 1s and World 2 facilities. What I want to end here on a note is, again, the interorganizational collaboration piece. It couldn't have existed without it. And what does that mean to you if you're trying to stand up your own effort? And I can just tell you what it means to me. To me, ACC, that's me, right? These slogans to me are people, right? These aren't just conceptual, entities out there. You have to use and leverage your actual relationships to make things happen. And again, to see who's an invested partner, and then to decide who's going to provide what capabilities and where we're drawing the lines. And so, again, when I think of Air Forces Southern, I think of Major Perkins. I think of Colonel, Nice back then, now Colonel Gavitt. I think of Medcom. I think Miss Jero with the app developers who she's connecting and coordinating. CGHE, I'm thinking Dr. Jackson. I'm thinking Colonel Erickson. I'm thinking Colonel Fox. When it comes to Air Force Reserves Command, again, they're the tactical implementing agency that's working under the auspices of AFSOUTH, SG. When I'm thinking Southcom, I'm thinking Mr. Figueroa, I'm thinking of Colonel Nice right now in that position. So hopefully, if you're starting to create some ideas and brainstorming, where do you go next? Think about who you know. Work your network. As always here, GHG is a team sport, and hopefully this is a good example of how that can manifest. With that, I will pass the baton. These are some resources.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Colonel Pass. That was fantastic. And I especially liked how you emphasized the role of the project out to supplement those goals and make AM&E more efficient, faster, and a bit more user-friendly. And we can see that it took a lot of effort to pull all those different pieces. We've talked a lot about the interagency partnerships, the ability to have access to the technology and all of the other pieces. But for those that have limited resources, right, how could they implement this program or parts of it or something similar to it?
So again, with limited resources, I'd say, again, going back to the theme here, know your network, know your resources, and have that end goal in mind of what you're trying to measure. Depending on the type of money that may be attached to your engagement activity, it may come with certain requirements. They call that the color of money. So make sure you, at least at a minimum, focus your engagement and efforts and how you want to measure things to meet those reporting requirements. Again, matching it to the complexity of the engagement, that might be where you want to match with what resources you have and what resources you may need, and where you may need to actually phone a friend to get those resources. And so if it's something that's truly small scale, very small scale, accessible and free, you may want to think of MCART if you are Air Force. It's available and ready. And if you are, it could be a multilateral exercise like we've seen with, let's say Centum Guardian. And there are elements of that where you absolutely could check off some things on your checklist, your readiness checklist. Small engagement, you may want to use that application, and you will get a data result in a spreadsheet form and decide how you want to create a great strategic output communication from that. And so, again, I guess to answer your question, it's knowing the engagement, the complexity, knowing that, again, that's something I also want to push for, is having a dedicated role to actually have the bandwidth to monitor that, because we easily come up with the answers that I have so many things to do. I'm flooded with other taskers that I can't really focus on any type of measuring campaign. And so that is also one of the big takeaways. Create your own resource, create your own space, identify a position to actually tackle this, and then create an implementation strategy around it that's important, that's catered to your resources.
Thank you. And, I asked this question for myself as well as the audience because I was there, but I'm curious, and I know the audience is as well, what challenges did you encounter during this project? What solutions did you implement, and what still remains?
Oh, there were so many challenges that were out there. Again, I believe the biggest challenge is the cultural shift. And during the first pilot position down in St. Lucia, uh, and I've seen this as you were on those hot washes with the pilot AM&E champions. The term stalking is comes up where, and if you don't have a sync in communication, and that's where we had to then pull in, whoa, we need to get some I need to sync more with AFSOUTH, right? And make sure that the expectation, the anticipation, the requirements are coming from the top bottom, right? To create the space in which we can operate, and not get that pushback. So that was a part of it. I would say the advantage of the training, and that was another opportunity that we didn't quite realize when we formed that training, is that it actually creates rapport. And you're actually empowering your AM&E champions to then advocate the reasons why to the actual clinical teams. And when you have someone on the ground like that advocating the big reason why we have these requirements, we may lose money, right? They're cutting programs. They're going to look at the effectiveness of this. We need something to show. That sort of gets people moving. That motivates people when they understand the why. And so seeing that from the before, like, hey, I don't understand why are they giving me pushback, to now, I love the progress. I love the progress, and I think we should keep moving forward with that.
Thank you. And finally, you briefly touched on a few COAs and a few ways ahead for this particular project, but what are your immediate next steps for scaling this up a little bit, or moving on to maybe other types of teams or missions, or is that in the works?
When you're talking about that, it all depends on the demand signal and what's out there. I can tell you, someone set me up personally. Again, GHG is a team sport, but Pacific Partnership, they're doing a small dental campaign effort out there, and they're definitely interested in ways of measuring it. So that's an opportunity there to really learn about what are the geographical, combatant differences, right? Completely a different environment. Southcom is known for being able to, really field that technology and innovation piece. It's a very permissive environment. When you get to somewhere like INDOPACOM, maybe very much so different, and different, other concerns there. So again, when I go down and I try to I'm in the seats, I try to journal those frustrations, and those frustrations often lead to opportunities if you think your way through it. So I'm excited to see what this may or may not look like in another AOR, because so much, this thing has really grown lightning speed from that project concept to now. And with Colonel Gavitt really pushing, getting that, innovative technology piece added from, and I'm an old school guy. There was a little bit of but we're doing everything right with pencil and paper. It's tried and true. And no, I've come to learn myself that no, absolutely, this is the way forward, especially for strategic communication and what we've seen as an end product. Right, the teams haven't been disturbed when you have requests for information on the ground at the time where it's relevant. So then it enables those communication flows again to get to the highest level, and so that's been quite eye-opening. So to see what that has the potential to look like in other theaters, truly excited for that, because I'm assuming it's going to look different. It will look different.
Okay, and we have a message here from Colonel Gavitt out in AFSOUTH that says MCART 2.0 includes the ability to log tri-service readiness activities. This will be beta tested by both Army and Air Force medical teams in Paraguay in August on the Amistad mission, with more to come.
moving along, we have a question from the audience. What capabilities do you think will be required to have this be utilized across all of the services? Now, we just had part of an answer to that with MCART 2.0, but what else do you think is needed?
So again, getting back to the cultural change part, and yes, Colonel Gavin, that's going to be a huge one for Paraguay to try out, and again, another learning opportunity for that beta test there to see what does data collection look like between the services and create that joint environment, increase the chance for interoperability through such a platform like that app. To get to your question here, what challenges for other environments? Wow, I've already seen a little bit of like, and again, when I'm at the very tactical level with what's going on, let's just say in other missions, and let's say I asked, hey, what are your readiness? Show me what your readiness goals are. How are we measuring things? And it's like building. You got to build up from the bottom again, and there are varying levels of understanding of what the requirements are, the reporting requirements, and varying levels of interest. And so identifying who those stakeholders are in those other AORs and getting the buy-in and creating new, interorganizational partnerships, it's sort of, nothing's a plug and play, right? Rinse, repeat. It's going to look different. There will be similar struggles as before or different ones. But I have to be open to those and meet those with new, fresh perspectives and ways forward, because they will look different, and I'm already starting to see that. So I remain hopeful, and we'll keep moving forward. And I think that's what's required. If anyone who's trying to stand up their own effort, you really need those advocates that you can get on board, that you can show the requirements, how you communicate. Again, your partners. It is a team sport, absolutely.
Okay. And just thinking about this more for those out there who might be considering doing something similar, what risk do you anticipate with standing up a program like this, and how might one be postured to mitigate them?
Well, there's always a risk associated with anything electronic. I will bring up just allude to a little story, would not mention any names, of course, but and this is something that we're currently thinking about, right? There are certain individuals who are tasked on these the actual tactical teams, the clinical teams, who have some concerns about data security, data protection. Hey, this app is in beta phase. I'm not comfortable using it. What about the certain Chinese or adversary threats out there with their telecommunication towers, right? And so those are all valid concerns. That is information that we are starting to collect, because that is, at the end of the day, whenever you and Team AFSOUTH knows best, you have to communicate the risks, likely in all areas. And so as this scales up and expands, it would be great to sort of assess what the risk is, where's this data being housed, just so participants know that information and don't have to question it. But there's also again, reporting requirements that we have to we must abide by. And so how do you negotiate security in the cyber realm and the type of data that's being collected, especially if you want to up this increase the utility of this, to bring partners, to bring a joint environment on, the material may get more sensitive. And so that would then ask for an increase in security evaluation and the risks. And so teaming up again, interorganizational partnerships, you have to get cyber on board, to evaluate that risk or whatever it may be. And when we get there, those are questions, right? Again, AFSOUTH, they're the ones that communicate that operational risk to their commanders through their own evaluations and assessments before getting the approvers from the higher authorities. So definitely a great question, but those are my first thoughts.
Okay. And one final question for you. We did see in the presentation where you showed us how AFSOUTH was able to put together that nice one slider that discussed the return on investment and the different metrics they were able to track from the Lamont mission. But how do you anticipate or hope the data will be used? And are there any conversations around how to make changes or meet demands based on what the data shows? And feel free to phone a friend, since we have Colonel Gavitt on the line, not to put you on the spot, sir, but can you speak to that for us?
No, yes, let's go ahead and go that route and say the supported entity here. I'd love to give them the stage on that and where they would like to take this tactical information. As the pool of data aggregates, it gets larger and larger over the time. I'll stop there. Oh, Team AFSOUTH?
Yeah, hey, it's Colonel Gavitt. Comms check, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Great, awesome. Yeah, thanks for the question. And Colonel Pass, you've done great work. We certainly appreciate the collaboration and the partnership with your team. That's been really transformational in our ability to not just communicate the value of these missions to a partner nation, those sorts of things, but also to our own organization. And I think the challenge, a couple challenges that I see and opportunities moving forward, this is really the first year that we've accurately captured what the readiness value of these missions are. And like Colonel Pass mentioned, it meant that this was sitting on a 4-star's desk 2 days after the mission was complete. So that's when they're asking the questions. How did it go? What went well? What didn't? And when you have that data, when the 4-star is asking those questions, that's how these things get immediately forwarded to higher levels, because it's, again, relevant. The challenge that we face is that each of the services have their own way of measuring readiness, and then each service has their own way of how they categorize that and where that repository of data is stored. So the next steps that we're working on with the Air Force are an automatic integration, a back-end integration of the MCART data into the system of record for Air Force readiness for medical personnel, which is MERTIS, so that the readiness data automatically updates into that. That was something that the SG6 was working on, but the contractors weren't able to get it done in time for this year's missions, so we're still working that for next year. The other piece was what I alluded to earlier, or what Colonel Pass alluded to earlier, which is the app now includes the ability to track ICTLs for the Army and KSAs for the Navy with an automatic calculation and the ability to auto-generate letters that go to readiness shops. We sent all of the readiness letters within 2 weeks of the mission. Every readiness shop and every group commander had a letter very clearly stating what every member accomplished from a CMRP standpoint, from an Air Force standpoint, during that mission, so that they could put it into MERTIS. The ideal would be, once we beta test the Army and Navy components over the course of the next year, once it works, work the back-end integration to the Air Force system, and then figure out the same process for the Army and the Navy. Again, I think this is a niche program. You know, this is a program that General DeGaux's set up. The MCART app is mandated for off-duty employment readiness logging. So this is data, this is built on a platform that already exists, that was a priority for the Surgeon General. It's designed not to be a silo. And I think it's serving a niche purpose here, because unlike back in our MTFs, where we have an electronic health record that we spent a lot of money on that should be able to abstract that sort of readiness data for our day-to-day activities, there is no real demonstrated way to do that overseas. And so that's really what we're aiming for on this. And that's all I have. Again, strong work, Ben, great presentation. Over.
All right, thank you, sir. And with that, I will pass it to our fearless leader, Colonel Erickson, for any closing remarks she may have.
Thanks for joining us, everyone, and thanks so much for Dr. Jackson and Colonel Pass for presenting this effort. And I really appreciate that Colonel Pass said, I think, no less than 3 or 4 times, GHE is a team sport, which is like my favorite phrase. So yeah, really emphasizing that collaborative effort to tackle tough challenges, right? I think this is exciting to see how it's growing in the joint space, Southcom, AFSOUTH, and the other components really taking the lead, and definitely think that this can be utilized in other areas as well. And I would, think that as we look at all the ways that we maintain readiness in those clinical skills, there's a lot of different ways that we do that, and probably we need all of those, but the data will help us to kind of compare the impact of those different ways that we get after readiness. So just kudos to all of the different stakeholders that have been part of this effort to refine processes, to be innovative, to help us as a GHE enterprise kind of understand how we can really get after those critical questions that our leaders have as to how activities where we are working with our allies and partners, how that impacts our overall readiness. And then let's think about how we apply what we've learned through this to getting after some of those other objectives that can sometimes be a little bit more difficult to measure in more of the security cooperation or strategic competition space. So with that, it sounds like Dr. Jackson, Col Pass will stick around for anybody else that wants to have continued dialogue. Thanks again for joining Peers number 8 from the Center for Global Health Engagement. Please, if we can maybe link in the chat the snapshot. Hopefully everybody saw that, the published snapshot that went out in conjunction with this. So without further ado, we'll wrap that up. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you, Colonel Erickson. My name is Maria Echeverry. I am the communication specialist here at the center, and I will be sharing some resources for us. So starting off with the most recent DoD GHE snapshot, issue 16 on AM&E champions achieving strength through medical readiness and data collection. A recently published article in Military Medicine on prototyping intelligent software solutions for global health engagement, and a recent article highlighting the Indo-Pacific Health Security Alliance event in Papua New Guinea on the Indo-Pacific Defense Forum. And finally, don't forget that you can find Peers recordings and other video resources on the CGHE YouTube playlist. All are linked here on the slides, which you will receive in the near future, but they are also linked in the chat. And we really value your feedback, so please share your thoughts on Peers number 8 by completing our short survey. If you have a topic you'd like to see featured on Peers, please reach out to us to our email at cghe@usuhs.edu. We welcome your suggestions. And finally, to stay connected with all things CGHE, subscribe to our mailing list to be added and receive our newsletters, event announcements, and the latest GHE knowledge products. And to stay fully connected with us and all of our activities, please engage with us through our various online platforms. You can follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, X, formerly known as Twitter, and save our CGHE playlist on USU's YouTube channel. This concludes our presentation for today. We really appreciate your participation in Peers number 8 and your ongoing interest in building a ready medical force through DoD GHE.